Back again for another episode of the Friday Council. Today is Friday the 4th of November 2022. How's everyone going?
Hot, stanky and hot.
It's pretty rough past few days with the heat.
I'm going to have a swack after this. Sweaty back. It's going to be uncomfortable.
How you going, David?
Yeah, can't complain. Well, I can, but got a wisdom teeth coming out in a couple of weeks, so it's weighing on my mind. But
yeah, in a couple of weeks. You got a couple of weeks of anxiety to build up. It's going to be fun.
You're doing all four?
Yeah. I think it's better to just get it all done at once rather than...
That's rough. I've only ever had one out, so...
We should record a little impromptu pod when you're just coming out of anaesthetism.
Might be on the high meds, pain relief.
I don't think I'm going to get any pain. He doesn't seem to think that the codeine or morphine-based painkillers do anything for wisdom teeth, so...
Damn, it's too gnarly. It's too painful.
What about some homeopathic remedies?
Yeah, I could hook you up, probably. My mum's into oils and stuff.
Anyway, so we're talking about today, we had a friend of ours, Devon, shout out to Devon. Give us the topic of making sacrifices to better your future. Is that right?
Making sacrifices in terms of what you are willing to sacrifice to make the world a better place. And I know Devon coming up with that question definitely would have implied some environmental aspect to it, because he is definitely what you consider a hippie, as I wish I would be considered. So, yeah, especially or kicking off in terms of the environment, that's an obvious one to consider what you're willing to sacrifice, because oftentimes the environmentally good choice is more expensive, more effort, blah, blah, blah. You know, if you're reusing things, rewashing things, when you could just buy a cheap disposable. I suppose that's the first point where the superficial level of sacrifice we all are expected or told we should take to make the world a better place.
My first thought comes down to like recycling as a topic. There's most places you see around the city, the yellow bin, the recycling bin's always the biggest one. Like they're trying to encourage people to recycle and reuse. Obviously, talking about environment can be quite broad. Just excuse that plane flying overhead.
Excuse that lovely chemtraily plane. Recycling's a farce, man. It seems to be just like a ritual. You know, people feel good when they put something in.
We're good.
People feel good when they put something in the yellow bin and they read the number, but it's like less than 10% is actually recycled, and then the products that are made from that recycling can't be made again. It's like the plastic degrades as you recycle it.
I'm not very knowledgeable on this. Like, it's one thing I've tried to be conscious about. You know, it seems like the big push to recycle, but so you reckon about 10%?
Yeah, I think it's less than 10% is recycled, because they have there's all these rules that it can't be smaller than a certain size, and there's obviously only certain plastics. And if it's contaminated with a whole bin is contaminated with one piece of unrecyclable plastic, it's landfilled, which I think is way more than
that's a big problem.
We think.
I remember reading about that. There was a big problem, possibly still is a big problem. I can't remember, but the CCC came out with Christchurch City Council came out.
Not the better CCC.
Came out with some stats like I don't know when it was, a year or so ago, when there's like an absurd amount because stupid people are putting like rubbish in their recycling bin, and then. But
even like you just look at some hard plastic, and it's the wrong number or whatever. If you put that in, it could be just a container. You ruin your whole bin. But yeah, so I think it's a lot like a ritual thing. It makes you feel good. Yeah. But I think it's going to need to be reduced.
Well, being confused with like pizza boxes, for example. You hear some say
green bin
because it's got fatty oils and leftover cheese or whatever, and then others will say it's cardboard, so it
definitely doesn't go. Whoever's saying that's just stupid.
I know, right? And the rules aren't super clear exactly. So a large proportion of the population are ruining their bins, thinking they're doing the right thing.
I think it's pretty simple. Like, if there's any food residue on it, it's green bin. As long as it's like a biodegradable material, so not plastic, obviously, but like cardboard is made from trees, so it's.
What about like Tetra Packs?
What are Tetra?
Like
they're the
like Up and Go
things.
and
No.
That'd be red bin.
I don't know.
Because
Yeah,
I doubt that's recyclable because, or maybe technically is a recyclable, but you would never be able to clean them out. So
and then you get to like in some state or city in America, they trialed like up to like 8 bins. They trialed to see if people would do it, and some people were doing it, but the amount of time you're spending. And then, like, the cost of each individual truck that's going to collect each individual bin, it's not worth it. And I think, like I just said, it's got to be like the reduce, reuse, recycle. It's got to be start at reduce, and then reuse in your own house. And I think there's a reason they come first, because the recycling is like a last ditch effort. But I mean, that's something. I think the reduce implies that you're sacrificing everything that you wouldn't have otherwise if you weren't actively intending or trying to reduce your consumption of things. So
yeah, I mean, convenience probably plays like a massive factor in I guess products and materials that you're just constantly using all the time. Yeah
I mean, it's a real, like, it's catching on. Obviously there's real cultural pressure to be green, although there's a lot of greenwashing now, a lot of charlatanism under the guise of big companies that are like greenwashing things just to get an extra buck. But
I'll be interested. What about terms of, say, like animals and like food? So particularly like veganism or eating less meat. Seems like a big push at the moment.
Well, that's that's definitely a sacrifice, because meat tastes good. Like, no one's gonna deny that, vegans or otherwise. I think.
Some would some would disagree.
Really?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, there'd be some hardcore activists out there.
Yeah, but I'm just talking about the taste.
Right.
Yeah, there's
like
still some.
Surely.
I'd say there's still a decent portion of people who just don't like meat. I don't find that hard to believe.
I wonder.
Just for disclosure, do we all eat meat here?
Yeah, I do now.
I do.
Didn't for a bit.
Not that much, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'd say less than the average person.
Yeah. I'm definitely sacrificing. I'd eat more if there was no...
If it was a cost, is it more of a cost thing? Lifestyle, health? What would influence it more for you?
For me personally?
Well, yeah, both, yeah.
If anyone cared. It'd be like a moral health thing.
No, it's fine.
Just for one bit of the two. What about you guys?
Like me, like I doesn't bother me so much. Like, I just like meat. I feel like animals, for example, certain animals, in my opinion, like it was like sovereignty over the animal.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, say if you're hunting, there would be some extremists that would say like killing all animals are bad. As the spectrum moves across, you might have some would say, okay, if you're killing the animal humanely, so like in a natural environment where they might die anyway from another animal, that's fine if you're killing. Then you have like factory farming and those sort of things, or like animals that are bred purely for food.
Yeah.
Like, even when you throw it's hard when you throw morals into it, but me personally, like, I don't mind. I just like eating meat.
Yeah.
Like,
and morally is going to be, everyone's going to be completely different.
So yeah, like I would probably eat more meat, not just like say that's the only thing I eat meat, but I'd probably eat less because of like lifestyle health choices. My wife can't eat as much meat, but it's just as expensive now. Like, it seems like the easiest or more cheaper option, you're looking at like grains, or beans,
in terms of calorie per dollar,
canned lentils, like those legumes sort of things.
Yeah. It brings to mind a real good point one of our good friends brought up. He's a bit of a hunter himself, and also a hippie, I'd say.
Okay.
He's made the point that kind of blew my mind, that oftentimes a vegan, counterintuitively, a vegan and a hunter will have more in common in terms of animal welfare and animal rights and their morals were more closely aligned than that of your regular Joe, like average unthinking meat-eating consumer, because the hunter obviously is getting it from a wild source where they have lived arguably the most ethically good life, and it's usually quite quick, and they're working hard for it, and obviously you can see why the vegans would like that over someone who's buying cheap supermarket chicken and beef, or the cheapest beef.
I guess, like, from an environmental standpoint too, this argument where farming, especially dairy farming, and the implications it would have on the environment, but equally, like, as a society to progress and to move on, like, we do need food, and when you're trying to balance like environment with supply, just general supply of food. Like, how do you find that middle ground?
Yeah. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that pretty much, not the solution to this, but you just take a look around the world, like what countries are damaging the environment the most? It's the poorest countries. So as a general rule of thumb,
not per person, I think. Like, oftentimes they're the ones polluting and making the products that we buy and then throw away. Well, if you're talking about manufacturing, like China.
Yeah.
But per person, like, we
maybe I would have to look at those stats, but put it this way, like, a country goes through like their dirtiest phase when they're developing. So a good example of this is like China at the moment. They're phasing out from developing to develop. So at the moment they still use like a lot of coal and stuff like that, and that'll be on a per capita no matter what metrics you use. But they're rapidly changing to like their big push for electric vehicles and stuff there. I think there's a city there where every bus is electric. I mean, I guess that's only a small in the grand scheme of thing, but I know that they have like quite like progressive policies when it comes to like EVs and stuff like that. So like generally, and even if these like don't show up in per person, like a good example is like India or something, like where the Ganges is filthy, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like
amazing that people like bathe in it every day,
but they don't really have a choice.
Yeah,
and so like they're going through a real dirty phase at the moment. But I think India's another country which is rapidly becoming more wealthy. Still a long way to go, but I think 100 years time from now, maybe 200, I don't know, the Ganges and stuff will be a lot cleaner than it is today, because I think as countries become more wealthy, they just naturally become, whether it's purely because they just have the ability to, whether it's financially or whatever, have the ability to look after their backyard more so than they did when they're poor and struggling, and they kind of have to use
wood,
like dirty fuels and. So I think the solution is, or to a large degree anyway, is just become more wealthy.
Yeah, make everyone as wealthy as possible.
And I like, for example, I think if you take a look at the Western world, even though there's still plenty of people who complain, like, it's a hell of a lot cleaner than it was 100 years ago.
Yeah.
I think some metrics, there's probably other in terms of like waste and stuff. We probably have more waste now, but like in sanitation stuff, like it's very rare in the Western world. It still does happen occasionally, but when it does, it's like shocking. If there's like dirty wastewater, or even dirty like drinking water is rare again. And it did happen here not that long ago, in like up north, some Havelock North, but it's very rare when it does happen. Like that's that's standard life in like a developing country. Like, you don't drink the tap water, it's dirty. Here it's a big deal if the tap water is dirty, and maybe there's other countries that aren't quite as good as New Zealand, developed countries that aren't quite as good. But yeah, in general, with like wastewater, like you're not going to see, well, maybe in certain cities if there's like large homeless encampments and things like that, but as a general rule of thumb, you're not going to see like open sewers. Yeah, 100, 200 years ago, you would have seen open sewers in New Zealand or anywhere in the Western world. Now we have, like, as a general rule of thumb, we have pretty good, like, sanitation systems. So,
yeah. Okay. I think. I think there's a lot of truth in there, and in terms of pollution, like CO2 and dirty fuel pollution, those poorer countries do emit more. But I think the individual, like our lifestyles compared to the average New Zealander compared to the average Indian, is so much more. Maybe not directly emitting, like how they burn fire to keep like wood to keep warm, which is like the dirtiest fuel, but we. Like the amount of rubbish we produce and the amount of oil and emissions that are used to produce all that to get to us, I think it's very indirect and like out of our sight. Even our bin, like I don't imagine poor Indians have like a rubbish collection service, so they have to live with any rubbish that they're dealing with. They probably burn it, to be honest. But to be fair, but yeah, a lot of our stuff is like out of sight, out of mind, and that's often the argument for like why should New Zealand do anything to like curb our emissions because we're so small, blah blah blah. But I think that's like a climate change emissions argument when a lot of the environmental problem is like pollution and like obviously real pollution and basically pollution, air, ground, whatever. And like in New Zealand now, we within our lifetimes have seen some of our favourite rivers no longer be swimmable because we're not willing to sacrifice the income loss from like the dairy, which is where we get most of a lot of New Zealand's income now. It used to be like sheep, now it's all dairy, and it's obvious that the dairy is ruining the rivers, but it seems like as a country we're not willing to make that sacrifice to make dairy less profitable. Harsher controls.
I think there's definitely an element of truth to that of like rivers being damaged. My understanding is like that stuff's gotten way better. Some of it it'll take like a long time to see results, but my understanding already, like if you compare the rivers to now to where they were 10 or 15 years ago, they're better. Now, if you compare them to where they were 50 years ago, you're probably right, they're still worse than they were 50 years ago. But I think we've reached the peak of environmental damage from dairy farming. I think the practices in that, again, look, maybe I'm wrong, but the gist of what I've heard is that the farming industry, especially the dairy farming industry, has cleaned up their act a lot in the past decade or so. And like one of those methods I know is what's it called? Like it's called like riparian planting or something.
Yes,
so that's where they plant like like flaxes or something that suck up like
the stream boundaries.
And there's a whole other lot of things that they do now that they weren't doing, maybe 15 or 20 years ago. So I think we're already on the right track. Can we get better? Probably. But yeah, you also do have to weigh up like the cost benefit. Like this is an extreme oversimplification, but let's just say that we completely shut down like dairy farming in New Zealand tomorrow. Will that have a positive impact on the environment? Yes. But will it have a huge negative impact on the economy? Yes. Yeah. And so what's better, like you have to weigh out the pros and cons. So like if we like destroy our economy tomorrow just so we have a better environment, is that going to be a better way of life? If we're like living in poverty, hundreds of thousands of people unemployed because the dairy industry's gone tomorrow, plus the tax revenue and everything, the flow-on effect, is that worth it to have a better environment? I don't think so. Yes, there still has to be a balancing act, but yeah, I don't think it's just as simple as being like, well, like shut it down because
it's a moral argument again, and that's the tricky thing. It's going to differ from every single person to every single person.
To me, you just have to negate the negatives as much as possible, but you're going to have to accept that there's probably going to be some level of environmental damage. But yeah, you want to curb that. And I only think, and like I'm pretty sure I have read like there have been like improvements in like the farming technology and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That hasn't, and that'll happen again. Like of course it's easy to say that it will happen, but I think naturally it will. They'll find better methods or whatever it is, technology or chemical, something that will limit the harm that So I think like it sounds ridiculous and probably is ridiculous, but I think I read something like they're trying to develop like a vaccine for cows that will stop them emitting methane or something.
Yeah.
That sounds far-fetched, probably is far-fetched, but that's it. Eventually I think we'll and I think we already have come a long way.
Yeah. I think like if I like sometimes I think about dairy farming like driving a car. It's like there's only a petroleum car. There's only so much you can make them efficient. At the end of the day, they're still going to be emitting and having a negative impact on air quality around. So I think dairy farming's like that. Like, we might be able to get it crank it down to like as efficient as almost possible for a biological animal, but like even if you've cranked it down, I mean the numbers or the intensification has also gone way up. So maybe per cow it's gone way better, but the intensification also has. And I think some of the rivers have gotten worse. I don't know if the rivers are getting better.
I'm pretty confident there. Again, like, I'm saying that.
But then it's like, what metric? It's like.
But I have.
How does it? You got to find out how you measure it.
Like a lot of them in summer, it's like not swimmable. Like
there's still there are still a lot that aren't. I think there are areas in the Waimak that are swimmable and others aren't, and I think it also fluctuates at times. Sometimes it's worse than others. But my understanding is that like it'll take like decades for many of these rivers to recover. So there may have been measures that have been implemented that are slowly improving these rivers, but we won't be able to swim in them again for another 20 or 30 because it takes a long time for them to repair.
Yeah.
Again, look, I'm not an expert on this, but this is just things that I've picked up, read, or listened to. I could be wrong, so yeah.
I think that's good. Moving on from there.
And another point I would also say, it's like if you think about like farming, it's like probably the most like generational sort of like business in New Zealand. Like farms get handed down throughout families, right? So if you think about it, it's in the farmer's best interest to like look after the environment, because the environment is totally destroyed. Then they're going to pass it down to their grandchildren or whoever, who are going to be inheriting something that's severely depreciated in value because it's been destroyed, right? Yeah. And obviously it's not like because there's a knock-on effect, like there's the farm itself and then the river or the surrounding area.
With that example, like I think the problem is that the river is basically a waste transport system. It's not part of the farm. Or that a lot of farmers get a bad rap, and I think they're like really good and they care. Like hunters,
I think most do now. I think there may have been a point in time where there was a significant portion that didn't care.
Yeah, but they're not going to cut into their own profit margin that much.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But can you blame them really?
No, you can't. Yeah. But I think in general, I would say at least 90% of farmers probably have good intentions about like the environment. Whether that be directly their own farm or the surrounding area. I think the vast majority are good people who want to do the right thing. And some of these measures and methods, as I say, will just take time. Like you can't implement them overnight. And I think that's one of the farmers' biggest gripes at the moment is like we have a government that's trying to bring in like radical changes. They're saying, oh, we can eventually get there, but we just can't do it overnight. Like it's going to take time.
Yeah. And I think some people may not be aware of the downstream effects. Like say if you're all for not knowing really how a farm works or too clued in about the environment, you just go from the mainstream news that farmers are polluting the environment, blah, 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 and environment good, farmers bad, pollution bad. You go, yeah, correct, we want like controls on the farmers, but then are they willing to sacrifice the fact that, or the cheap meat? So like, cheap meat and milk. So if they have to de-intensify, profits go down, prices go up for us.
Yeah, anyone who's like drinking milk or eating meat, unless you're sourcing it specifically from like those super ethical like small farm that you're verified as like doing everything to the highest of standards, I think you need to be very careful about what you're saying, because you very well could be a hypocrite essentially. And here I'll throw my mum under the bus. She loves to complain about dairy farming, but she fucking drinks so much milk. So it's like, how can you be complaining about like dairy farming? To be fair, I think she's come around a bit on the dairy farming. She's been a bit red-pilled in the past year or so. So she's come around a bit. But yeah, she used to be super anti, and I'm like, how can you be like talking all this shit about dairy farming when you like go through like 3 liters of milk like every 4 days? Like, like you're a massive consumer of milk.
Not by yourself, surely.
You probably hear and my father.
That's a lot of milk.
Yeah, they drink a lot with they're tea addicts, so
so
drink it with their tea.
About that, like eventually, if you want that pristine protection of the environment, at the end of the day, you're gonna have to pay more, and everything's gonna cost way more.
Yeah,
and it's easy for someone like any of us to say we have like a reasonable amount of disposable. Like we can handle that, but it always affects the poorest.
Yeah, and
the most.
I think there's another argument there, and I think I actually heard this from it was either Gordon Ramsay or it was from Marco Pierre White, who's another famous chef. If you hadn't heard of him,
he was a mentor of Ramsay, I think.
I think he was. Yeah, I think you're right. And he sort of made this argument when they're like, and this is speaking like sort of specifically to like factory farming. It's like, yeah, we can look at it and we can say like it's unethical to have animals living in these like unnatural conditions, tight confines and stuff like that. But then you've also got to like look at it, the human aspect of like if we took that away, like how many? That's right. The lowest people, the poorest people of society will no longer be able to afford, cheap, essentially high quality food, like. So that's it. So you do have to balance this between the fact that these products are like, very real, nutritious products that are often consumed by, milk, for example, is considered like obviously a staple, and it is relatively cheap for like the quantity like of calories and nutrition that you get from it.
Is it possibly like a subjective thing, but generally if say like meat, for example, if the conditions that the animal was brought up in, like free farm or grain fed or whatever, is the food quality itself like better tasting anyway?
I think
apparently.
Or like milk. Like, I feel like milk's one of those things. To me, it doesn't really matter what brand or what type. Like,
have you tried fresh farm milk?
I want to. There's
there's
certain milks when I go to the supermarket, you look at the pricing, it's like,
the cheapest.
Like I do kind of want to try the more expensive milk because it'd be justifying like one less coffee a week or something like that. But it comes down to it, it's just like, no, I just grab the cheapest thing.
Yeah. The difference in product as well. I'd highly recommend the raw milk. It tastes bussin' and there's a lot of health benefits.
Okay.
And people who are lactose intolerant can drink raw milk because there's an enzyme in it. Not in New Zealand. You have to sell farm to customer. You can't sell it any other way.
Okay.
New Zealand.
I
got a hookup. I got a raw milk hookup.
That'd be interesting to try. I think
I'll bring some back from you. When I come back from Dunedin for work, I stop by and get my hookup. But
like meat anyway, like it seems, just this is generalizing, but if you bought meat from Mad Butcher or like Pack and Save, it just doesn't seem generally as good as if you had bought it from like a specialty butcher or if it was like home killed or whatever on a farm.
Maybe, but I don't.
But it's possibly subjective.
Yeah, I don't, because I doubt that as a generalization, like butchers are probably getting the same factory farm stuff unless they're specific, or they may have a variety, as supermarkets do. Some of it's free range, some of it's not. So yeah, I don't. Again. And there's probably certain butchers who like make sure they get the highest quality cuts of meat, and they probably charge more for that. And that's only a certain portion of the population will be able to buy it from them. But I think just a general sort of message to like all of this stuff, environment, climate change, whatever it is that we're constantly like improving. It's just, I think a lot of people want this stuff implemented tomorrow. We can't do that because of like the shock that it will cause to essentially the economy, which is essentially real people's lives. If you stop oil and gas tomorrow, like how many, like 10% of the population, probably less, have EVs at the moment. So,
that's my phone call.
So like,
ignored. So we'll keep going.
So you just can't, like, some of these things, like, I think in 50 years time from now, for example, I think at least 50% of cars will be EV. it's just a rough estimate. 50 years from now, 50% of cars will be like. If you look at the numbers, like the amount of EVs that get produced every year, it's like it's growing exponentially. It's still a tiny percentage, but it's growing exponentially. So like some of these things just take time.
Yeah,
and just like a real simple way of even thinking about it is the fact that oil and gas, like a finite resources, we're going to run out of them at some point anyway. So we actually have to find these alternatives, but they just take time. So we just have to do the best that we can without saying, no, we're going to ban like planes and cars and farming tomorrow. Like, no, we just have to say we strive for 50 years now to be doing all these things at a far lower percentage that we are today, but we just have to accept that it will take time.
Yeah.
And that at the moment,
which is what I think a lot of to battle for the environmentalists is that like that time is the thing that we don't have supposedly.
And a lot of it also probably comes down to like infrastructure, because it's not easy just to implement like I don't know, hundreds or thousands of like EV charging stations. It seems like in the last 3 or 4 years or whatever, when they started putting them out, it's kind of like disabled parking or disability parking. It was like a perk. If you had an EV car, like you generally would like get parking closer to whatever. It seems like you're seeing more charging stations, but a lot of it's infrastructure. It's like it's not easy as well in terms of like, let's say housing. Like if you're starting to put up townhouses without parking, or like trying to mass like residential area of living, it's not easy. You can't just run like cords out to the street. Like it would only be like a luxury for certain people. Or
that does seem counterintuitive, isn't it?
It's like you need to have that kind of balance, or depends on like your lifestyle.
Mind you, they're intending people in townhouses to be on public transport, not own a car, full stop.
Well, right.
And again, like the infrastructure is not there in place. Like the public transport is not up to standard, and that's like half the problem is that we sort of have these people at the moment who are dictating to us. Like, hopefully it would have changed now for change of mayor in Christchurch, but the last mayor and her council would love to harp on about how we should all be using public transport.
Or bicycles.
Yeah. And to be fair, they put a lot of work into building cycle lanes. Yeah. So to their credit, they've done that. But the public transport in Christchurch is average at best. Yeah. So you can't expect people to be using public transport when it's not very good. If we had a world-class public transport system as they may have in like New York or London or something, then maybe you've got...
It's very hard to... Yeah. Like, if you're bringing a lot of people into one central location, it seems like, we've got it pretty okay. But if you're going to go from one outside suburb to another, it generally does not make sense, like using public transport. Biking, that can be difficult, especially if you've got a lot of theft of bicycles. E-bikes are getting cheaper, but it's not, like, not everyone can afford it, or it's like disposable product, like to buy an e-bike to get around. Like you're saying, like I've experienced public transport in Hong Kong and New York as well. Like, although it's dirty and like pretty rough, it's very useful and easy to get around. Like from one side of New York to the other, hop on the subway. Like they've got it pretty good there, but a place like Christchurch, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's no good. I was going to say, like, when we, at the very start of the podcast, when we framed it as, like, what are you willing to sacrifice with an environmental slant, thinking about it a different way, and all of us will be like this to different extents, but we're all willing to sacrifice some of the environment for our own pleasure, as a culture obviously do with the meat. So we're obviously, and that's a moral issue.
I'll put, like, again, this is a massive...
She's saying, I'm willing to pollute the environment a little bit for cheap meat.
This is a massive oversimplification.
I don't agree, maybe, but I still eat meat, so...
Yeah, I'll make it, again, a massive oversimplification, but just to make a point, is like, if you think about the way that we live today, is like, so like we consume a lot, we do some damage to the environment and stuff like that, but would you rather live to way we did today, or let's say if we went back to being cavemen, it'd be better for the environment, right? But would that be better for humanity?
I have had that written down. I had a lady at work who was real anti-environmentalism, and she was like, what do they want us to do? Go back to like living in huts and stuff?
Exactly. So we could do that. That'd be better for the environment, but would it be better for humanity? I don't think it would.
Yeah, well, I mean, we would have been more like in terms of a lot of like mental health, it was probably much better. But in terms of physical health, no. Like in terms of how long you're going to live, no. But is that like then it gets real philosophical? Like, what's the point? What are we doing all this for? Like, is it just to live as long as possible, or is it to like? Yeah. So I think in a lot of ways the primitive lifestyle, and a lot of people try that. They try and go back to like eating primitively, like
spending more time
with family, or alone.
And there's merit to that, but probably many of those same people also want to get on a plane and fly to Fiji or somewhere at some point as well.
Yeah,
you don't get to pick
catch
and
a
choose.
boat. Like you're not going to be
for sure
taking a 1 month journey to go visit Europe. Or
so there are certainly merits to incorporating some of the things that we did when we were hunter gatherers or cavemen. But I think that 90% or more, probably closer than 99% of humanity, if they were faced with the reality of, do we go back to being cavemen? So that means you give up your phone, your internet, everything. They'd be like, actually, no, it's not such a good idea. It sounded good in theory, but when I think about, I can't have my phone and text my girlfriend. And,
well, like all day, every day for them was like getting enough food to survive, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
All day, every day.
When you're talking about like using your phone, for example, as just in terms of technology, the amount of waste or like e-waste that has been accumulated in the past years from constantly like evolving phones and computers, etc., just how technology's expanded.
No, that can be real toxic shit.
It's very, very bad, but equally, it's such a common thing or luxury for people in the West
Western,
to have like new TVs every 3 to 5 years or a new cell phone for some people every year. That they might be preaching like environment, but equally, like, are you willing to give up your
these microphones we're talking on right now?
Your phone's like for like TikTok, your social media, or your consumption, but like trying to push a narrative of like we're trying to do it for the environment.
Yeah,
most
you got to
people,
check yourself out, and a lot of people would be just myself included, like oftentimes real disappointed in yourself, and it's real easy to talk a big game, be like, I'm an environmentalist, and then you're upgrading, drive a ute for work.
Yeah, and so I think that's that's where we have to sort of stop being so hard on ourselves. Because I think if you take like a bird's eye view of humanity, like we're constantly improving. We're far from the perfect product, the finished product, but you take where we are compared to 50 years ago, I think we've made strides in most areas of life, and we can debate that there's some that are going backwards for sure.
Is that a whole as a society, or
I think
I've read some places that millennials are like the first generation that may not be better off.
I think the key to the wording is that they think they won't be better off. It's not that they won't be better off, it's that they think that, and that doesn't surprise me because they're being brainwashed at school. They're being told that everything is wrong with the world, so they think that life's going to be terrible. They think the world's going to end in 20 years because of climate change and stuff like that.
I'm not necessarily thinking from like I get what you're saying. I think for the most part, like if you want to improve and better yourself, you need to put the hard work in to do it. But in terms of like just general like way of living, it seems housing in proportion to like earnings or whatever, where it might have been more easier for people in the past or our like boomer generation to buy a house or their first home, or like cost of food, like everything is obviously getting more expensive as time goes on. Is our way of life getting better? I think yes, like evolving and technology and all that. But
people say quality of life, but then there's like more mental illness than it ever has been. Everyone's more depressed than they ever have been. I would say, the other thing is, if you look at the quality of the houses that boomers were living in compared to the quality of houses that many people are living in today, is substantial upgrade. We're sitting in an old house today, and we know that it gets bloody cold in winter, doesn't it? Well, in particular. I live in a nice double glazed insulated house. It doesn't get too cold in winter, so the quality of housing and also the size, I've seen like the average house of size is like quadrupled or something in the past 50, 60 years. So land prices have gone up too, for sure, but there's been a big shift in people's standards. Boomers were happy to live like in a little shack. It's their first home. These days, a lot of people want to live in a brand new freaking palace as their first house. So that's part of the problem as to why, because there are,
and again, it's a generalization. I'm not saying that. I think like the proportion of wage to house value or whatever is much higher than it used to be.
It's like expectation.
Part of it is an expectation problem. People want to move into a big fat house.
I agree. I agree with that sentiment. Yeah, I think as someone myself trying to get into your first home, I think as a generalization, most people think like for your first home you're going to get like your forever, not necessarily forever home, but like there's expectations of it's got to be double glazed. You got to have two part double garage or whatever, but I mean it depends. Generally you would renovate or make improvements to houses, but there will be some examples where a house built in 1920 may not have had much done to it, but the cost of that house is still inflated.
There's got to be a point where the ever increasing population where that's the population's changing, so the standard of housing that someone can expect for a first house, if at all they're ever going to own a house, is going to change. Like you can't expect to have a 2-car garage in New York City because it's so big, it's so intense.
Yeah.
But I did want to say just before I wrote it down a while ago that when we were talking about the whole meat stuff, and I often think about the true cost of a good. So using that meat as an example again, the dairy farming, like the cheap meat, the relatively cheap meat we pay now is effectively in a way subsidized by the cost on the environment. That's why it'd be more expensive if we protect the environment at all costs. That's why it's more expensive, because you can't get as much out of it and so on, and it's pretty obvious. But so I think in a lot of things we have, especially in Western societies, we have cheap electronics and whatnot. The true cost of that electronic should be vastly more, and so because it's so cheap, the environment's taken an L, so basically subsidizing our cheap phone that we're going to keep for a year, and
yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Well, you also have it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. We know that these phones, using phones as an example, are built in Asian countries, and so the output or the waste or pollution or whatever is in another country. So it's easily to say China is producing the most amount, but are you going to make that sacrifice if there were to be?
You're going to buy a New Zealand?
If you're going to buy a New Zealand made phone, sure, there would be people that would do it regardless. Those are the one end.
Yeah.
Others, well, obviously, it would be more expensive if you're taking into account where are they going to source their materials from. Probably a lot of it in terms of chips and whatnot will come from China anyway. So getting them here, it will cost more for labor to make the phone, being in a Western country. It's like the US, wherever Trump was trying to get back into power and bring a lot of manufacturing back from China to the US. That would become more expensive, but in some ways we understood from the pandemic and all the supply chain disruptions that you do need some sort of self-sufficiency or on a national level, as opposed to relying on one nation for
I think all the way down from a national level all the way to an individual level for self-sufficiency. That would solve them.
It's what's you do in terms of sacrificing for a better life. You have to take the L on some things, give up whether it be environmental factors for way of living. Improved way of living. You've got to find the fine line, and then does it come down to a individual moral thing, or should it be societal based? Should it be down to government making decisions for us? You don't want too much regulation.
No.
But then in some ways, if you have an environment or a industry or whatever that is, I don't know, abusing whatever power or abusing you may need to implement regulations.
Yeah. Yeah, I always thought, saying before recording, eco-fascism is probably the most realistic, effective. You disagree with me, please, if you do. But of getting some protection for the environment, and it definitely takes, I think, government regulation, because it's so intangible, and on the individual level, people don't. It's a number with 20 zeros or digits past it, it's like incomprehensible to the human brain. It's so big. So when one farmer's like, oh, I'll just dump this bucket of, or I'll just let the cows, my 3 cows, piss in the river. It's all good. It's gone. It's out of sight of mind. Or like in your own backyard, like I'll just burn this plastic. It's all good. It's just me, just little old me. I forgot where I was going with that.
It's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so I was talking about microphone issues. We're recording?
Yep.
Okay. What, go again from eco-fash?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. So basically what I'm saying is I was wondering whether eco-fascism, just strict regular government regulation was the answer, because the environment is such a massive and diffuse problem that an individual farmer, say, who's going to take an L in his income, de-intensify his cows and riparian plant, pay all that money, when his neighbour is able and legally able to have like 1,000 cows on it and be dumping, letting his cows all piss in the river. Like why would you do that? And so that's where I think government regulation's needed. In terms of the environment, I think it's the only way that you're going to protect it.
Yeah, just regulation. I don't think you need fascism. You just need you do need regulations, and there are regulations in place now. So yeah, and it's the same for everything. It's the same for other industries like mining and stuff like that. The way that we used to mine was just rip the earth bare and then do nothing. Now there's strict regulations in place, like you have to follow certain protocols when you're mining it, and once you're done you have to put all the shit back in place as best you can. So yeah, regulations when it comes to environment are good. Otherwise, you will just have people who take shortcuts. But as far as I'm aware, there's some pretty decent regulations in place which prevent the most of that stuff now.
How much in terms of regulation? I mean, from an environment stand though, how much regulation is too much regulation to the point where it prevents like output of, I guess, betterment for society? Not, I don't want to say like taxing as an example, but there's that fine line between taxing income to benefit revenue for government, but then if it's not being used efficiently.
Yeah. I don't know. It brings to mind, like, just makes me think we're also, like, even generationally, we're also used to, like, so much now in, like, the Western countries. And I feel like you can argue either way, but I think we're probably overshot in terms of our, like, lifestyle being sustainable. And then a lot of people default to, like, hopefully someone will invent something and we can all just keep living the way we want. And that relates to my old co-worker saying, like, oh, what do they expect us to go back to, like, primitive living in caves? And I think there's going to have to be a kind of halfway if I don't think it will ever happen, but if we truly wanted to, we'd have to sacrifice a lot as a society and our standard of living. And but then possibly, like, a lot of the throwaway culture we live in is intentional. It's like intentionally a result of the like how they make money in the monetary system. Like it's in a company's best interest to make a product that only lasts a year and forced to buy another one.
Yeah.
So
they can grow.
The incentive for in our society, in our capitalistic society, is not for like reuse or reuse. Like the whole incentive is to like consume more and faster.
Yeah, I say reproduce, but like produce more. Grow more, like for companies anyway.
It's like more.
Yeah, more
and growth.
Profit.
Yeah, we want the growth. Like,
feed the shareholders.
Yeah, 3% growth, which is on a they want what's the quote? Infinite growth on a finite planet. David, you might have something.
So like there is some. Yeah, I get what you're saying, and like I'm not a massive consumer myself. Like, I try and hold on to my phone as long as possible and stuff like that. I still have a laptop from like 2013.
Solid.
Yeah, so like,
solid,
I'm not a huge consumer, but at the same time,
comparatively to Indians, we are.
But if that
Poor
wasn't,
Indians.
If people weren't consuming like that, it would probably also reduce like the rate of like
improvement.
Yeah, improvement, right? And so I think that overall was a net positive. The rate when we're constantly improving on stuff, because chances are that will lead to like breakthroughs that can be beneficial for the planet.
Mm-hmm. I see what you mean.
Oh, and
That's
even
true.
if not for the planet, like I think you would have to argue, even though there certainly are some drawbacks to like modern technology, I think it's a net positive as a whole on the planet, being able to have a phone, whether it's even just being able to call the cops or something anywhere.
You said as a whole for the planet,
for society,
for people,
I should say,
for humans,
for society, I'd say that technology is a net positive, even though there certainly are some big drawbacks to it.
Not for the planet. I'd say definitely not.
Not for the planet.
Even the internet as a whole. I can't imagine living in an environment where, like, to hear what happened across the world, you have to wait for the newspaper the next morning, or something, you know, or you're trying to communicate to people, like friends and family across the world, like. Only via self. You got video calling now. I don't know much about the metaverse. But.
And well, on that note, and it's what you said something about infinite growth on a finite planet. That's true in terms of natural resources, but that's the thing with technology. It's no longer just the planet, is it? Technology essentially can be infinite. Internet is infinite. Already, like, you see people who get paid. Some people are fortunate enough to get paid to play video games. So, like, that's like creating something out of nothing. Like, well, obviously you have to physically create the technology to create it. But like, there's these NFTs and stuff like that, even though I don't understand them. Like, with the internet and technology in general, that significantly, whether it's infinite or not, significantly increases, like,
different. It opens up different markets.
So it's no longer just about, like, the physical resources that it used to be, land and minerals and resources. Now you have technology, which opens up internet and internet of things, whatever you want to call it.
That's assuming you can figure out how to recycle the minerals that make that power everything that makes the internet happen, which is all like rare metals and definitely finite things. But that's the thing. It's in terms of, like, recycling electronics is just not financially viable at the moment. I suppose it might, if we don't completely screw ourselves, like kind of the mainstream narrative is, and like it's completely inhospitable, the market will self-correct and it'll make it worth it to salvage little tiny flecks of gold out of.
I think I know you use, like, it's easy to say it's a cop out, like, someone will eventually come up with something, but I mean, I think if you have to look, it's just like that's what's happening. Like, if you look at where we were from 50 years ago, like, the amount of advancement is insane. And that should, in theory, be even bigger, the rate of advancement, because it goes exponentially in the next 50 years. So I think we will figure out, like, essentially, like, if you take, like, like a universal view, as say, eventually we're going to run out of all these resources on Earth. That's right. So we have to become, it sounds crazy now, but we have to become intergalactic, where we can harness energy from, like, space, the universe, where there's infinite minerals and resources.
And you go through consuming.
So it sounds insane now, but I think we eventually will figure that out.
I think I agree with that. And that's, if the nature of, if our, like, what's the word, destiny is to just, like, consume and keep growing and consuming planets as we go. It doesn't even have to be that, like, we continue, like, because that makes it sound like, we, like, take everything and then leave. I think, like, if we learn to, like, hunt, like there's infinite energy in the sun, all right. So eventually we'll figure out how can we harness lightning, example. Like, well, eventually I think we'll figure out how we can harness all these things, which doesn't actually require, like, decimating a planet. That might be part of it, but also some of it could be, they say that asteroids are full of minerals, so, like, and that's, I know what you mean. But I think, and you mentioned the word exponential as well. I think, again, in terms of, like, our per person use and direct explicit harm on the environment might be getting better, but, like, as in terms of, like, a historical scale of humanity, I think, like, the more less and less native forests, the mercury in the oceans is rising up, and so that stuff is only getting worse, and a lot of it is exponential. So I don't know. I think it's so, like, detached. We don't see it oftentimes, but, like, the Amazon is a fact. It's not growing. It's getting nailed.
And that's a great example.
And we could be like, someone hopefully can invent something that can replace timber, but no one has, and it's running out of time.
That's a great example of the Amazon, though, right? Is that country? What is it? Whatever the name of the country that Amazon is, and it's a very poor country. So that's it. They're doing this. They're pillaging their resources without doing it in a sustainable way or an eco-friendly way, because that kind of have to just
Yeah.
to put food on the table. That's the
Yeah.
thing. If the Amazon was in New Zealand, I don't think that we'd pillage it
No,
quite to the way that they do.
But because it goes into like palm oil that we eat, like all around the world that we eat. So they're doing it for us. So we're kind of causing that again.
Yeah, so that's a fair point.
Yeah.
It's just the factor that you have to deal with in terms of globalization, though. Like,
Yeah.
like if you're producing
Yeah, that's true.
you're just thinking like trade, for example. Like, there's always going to be that aspect of like detriment or the negative to the environment if you're shipping down, I don't know, millions of containers across the world like every year, like for materials or goods or products or whatever to make it to other shores or via planes, boat. Like there's just some of that. It just you can't contain it unless like you're saying, your workmate. Do we just go back to being cavemen and bring it down to like our home level or like living in our like family environment?
Yeah.
So like if you live in your own home, for example, if you've got land and grass or whatever, you can look at it from a self-sustaining point. You could start building veggie gardens, that sort of thing, bring it back that way. But in terms of like, your products that you use, your electronics, like
I know what you mean.
you food you consume, like we
Growing,
can't we can't
some
get
broccoli
grapes or whatever. We can't get olives unless
we
we
get grapes.
Well, yeah, sorry, that's a bad example. Yeah, you've got vineyards here, like nothing, like everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's always going to be like foods that you need to import. Like you can't. Can you get avocados in New Zealand? Like,
but do you need avocado?
Yeah, well,
do you
that's
need
what I'm
anything
saying.
that you
But
can't
like,
grow?
do we just go back to that thing where it was a common thing for the generation before us? Their foods that they would eat would be like your meat and three veg.
And it's only like two generations. It's like our grandparents that would never have had a palm oil chocolate bar. Like that was unheard of. They wouldn't have known what palm oil was.
And to be fair with like the palm oil, I know that is an issue, but I think I notice, maybe on Cadbury chocolate bars, they say that they source it ethically. So like that's the thing with like all of the stuff, there probably is a way that it can be done ethically and somewhat sustainably, if not just sustainably. But that's the thing. The problem with those people in the Amazon is that they're poor and only think about the next meal. That's the problem. If they were, if the Amazon was in New Zealand, we have the ability, because we already are relatively so wealthy, that we can think about 50 years from now.
Yeah.
So we'll do things way differently. So again, that's a big problem in these areas where people are thinking about the next meal.
Yeah,
they don't have the luxury of thinking about 50 years from now. We do. We start, the wealthier we become, the more that we do have the ability to say, actually, we should stop doing things this way, do it a much more sustainable way. Yeah, but
you're right.
So,
and then that would also
again,
it's
never
like
be perfect.
if they're in Amazonian, you look at a block of land, you're like, this can make me $0 or rich, like comparatively rich. And again, it's like when it comes to the individual level, they go, "Oh, the Amazon's so big, it's all good." It's like, what's one football field for me?
And that's the thing, is it's actually not in their best interest to do it in an unsustainable manner, because eventually it will run out. But that's the problem, is that they don't have the luxury of seeing that far into the future.
Well, you also have people that will abuse like the resources.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally, like if you're gonna
like poachers is probably a good example.
That's
abuse,
what I mean. Yeah, poachers. Yeah, like there will be people that do that, but for the betterment of the country as a whole, like it's your like kind of like your bread and butter in a way. You got to look after it.
Yeah, and that so when you're on the country level, that is got to be government control. So the people who control the country on that scale.
Let's just say like the New Zealand, like the slogan we used to have, like 100% pure, like from a tourism perspective.
Yeah. That's a greenwash.
Yeah, well, that was kind of like pushing is what New Zealand would be known for, as being clean, green, like covers at us. We've got the best rivers, we've got the best mountains, or whatever. But just not necessarily.
Yeah, but I would say it's still in large parts is true. There still are large parts of New Zealand which are untarnished. Fjordland, for example.
Yeah.
Fjordland
is that? I don't know if that's like. That's just like happenstance, I think. It's just because it's like too hard to mine. So we haven't.
It's just
too hard to fell all the trees, so we just haven't. Well, and it's like a lot of the university remember learning that a lot of the like protected lands that we have are just like unfarmable anyway. So we've like farmed everything and continue to fell and farm all the flat, nice land, and then they'll be like, oh, but we'll put this like sheer slope, which is like on a flat surface is like a lot. It's like a hectare or something, but it's like unusable for anything. Yeah. Not even, it's like tussock. It's like, you know.
Well, you're just thinking back, well, like 150-ish years, like for Christchurch, for example, you're like the early settlers that would have had to cross over to get to Littleton. Like just the amount of work and effort to, you know, to produce what you get. Or if you're looking at like certain skyscrapers that are built, like there will have to be some sort of sacrifice, whether that's like human death, like for example, if you're trying to be a pioneer and explore the unseen land or whatever, like, you know, you may just have to have certain sacrifice, but generally, you know, you're wanting to improve society.
Yeah. I mean, just by being alive, you have to consume stuff and produce waste as a human body.
Yep, exactly.
You have to. So there's like, you just don't want to try and do it in a sustainable way. You don't want to end up like those like insect populations where they like exponentially grow and then like crash down because they consume all the resources, and that's where the fear comes from. But do you guys? You know,
well, and again, just to like draw this back to this whole point was meant to be what are we meant to sacrifice, and I think that was just in general, but yes, probably had environmental undertones. But my personal belief is that the only thing that you need to like sacrifice is if you have a child, sacrifice your needs for their needs. If you don't have a child, then your partner and maybe family, especially as your parents grow old. I don't think you have to have any grand purpose to have sacrificed all these things for the planet, the world. If you do have like a grand calling to, you know, be a missionary or an environmentalist, by all means follow that. But I would say that in 99% of cases, people get like Devin, for example, probably loves what he does. I doubt he'd do it if he didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a beneficial, it's a mutual relationship. He loves the work and it's also good for the environment. Yeah. So if you have that inkling, by all means follow it. But you know, I doubt that you'd be doing it if it made you miserable.
I'd say I'd agree. Yeah.
So if you don't have that grand calling, don't feel guilty.
Right. I see what you mean. Just realistically, not everyone is going to be a saint or a missionary, you know, and it's okay. But if you, as I say, if you have got a child, then certainly be a good father or mother, and if not, be a good partner or a good sibling in your family. Yeah. I think that's all you need to really.
It's kind of like you zoom out, like. You start with your core, so your base. So if you're single, generally it could be more about you. Maybe you should be looking at a perspective of like helping others. So I think generally it's good to help others and see people succeed.
It's one of the tips for people with depression.
Yeah,
like, go do something for someone else.
If you're like married or in a relationship, you obviously will have to sacrifice some of your needs for your partner's needs. Children especially, like I'm not a dad, but I feel like when the time comes, you just learn and adapt, and your way of thinking for the future becomes more about like your children and helping your see them succeed and want them to have a better life than you had. But as a whole, like a society, like there's things we can do to improve, but I think it's kind of like two things. Is if you're looking at like a trend graph or whatever, you'll have two different lines, like for yourself and family, and then like society as a whole, and you want both of them to go up, but like not we'll have different living circumstances.
And I'm not saying like go out and be an asshole. I'm just saying that I don't think that you need to, like, as I say, do anything extreme. I think it's generally good advice to like try and be a good person, but I don't think you need to like really go out of your way, unless, as I say, if you have that calling, by all means follow it, but as I say, chances are then you'll get enjoyment out of it, so you're doing it because you enjoy it, really.
But also just I think like don't, at the end of the day, don't like be a hypocrite about everything.
Which the environmental aspect again is like there's a lot of hypocrisy in myself, especially
in terms of celebrities, even like trying to push us. I would just use I enjoy watching occasionally like Formula One, which, you know, produces so much fuel wastage, pollution, but it's like a rich sport. There's a lot of money, and then you'll see celebrities that will travel there to watch and be part of it. I don't know specifically, but like some celebrities probably are also preaching the environmental aspect of it. You can't, you know, you can't have two and two together.
Yeah.
If you want people to stop producing CO2 or, you know, better for the environment, then how are you supposed to travel the world, sort of thing? You know, like you can't have it both ways. There'll be some sacrifices where you take the L for the W for other, you know, but then other ways I don't think there's many lose-lose situations, and if there were lose-lose situations as a society, we'd find the solutions.
Yeah, we'd quickly.
Yeah, we'd flip it the other way.
Yeah, yeah, like yeah. If polluting the environment more made meat prices more expensive somehow, not less expensive, there's no way.
Just wouldn't do it.
Yeah. What else do you guys think people should sacrifice? Oh, I'll say what one I had down.
All right,
what I'm willing to sacrifice, and this goes to. Seems like the better you are as a person, the more you're going to be able to help others in society as well. So a lot of the stuff you're willing to sacrifice is going to have to do with yourself, I think, a lot of the time. So I was thinking, I'm willing to practice monogamy as a sacrifice, because I think if we're being honest as guys, it's a sacrifice. You're willing to rein in your urges to be with one lucky lady or man or whatever. And that's a sacrifice, and I think that helps societally, especially with kids. It makes more structured family environments. So that's a sacrifice that most people make unconscious. Well, a lot of people don't end up keeping the sacrifice that they've made.
In terms of what you've said, like, I personally agree with you. I do know that there will be not certain environments where, like, a nuclear family, dad, mum, child, like, it just hasn't worked out in the past, which may influence their environment and how they grow in the future. But what you're saying, I think it's what you're saying. Yeah, for me, like, I think
sacrifice.
It's a sacrifice,
but the benefits are worth it.
I think it's better generally for the child to see their parents in a loving relationship, so that they can learn, you know, how to care for other people based on what they see their parents do. But if you don't have that, then it might be a bit different. Yeah. But yeah, it's hard in today's society practicing monogamy. Like, if you're hearing people like
harder,
cheating on people all the time, jealousy, like,
and you see basically the most attractive people. If you're on social media on your phone a lot, you'll be seeing like tens every day.
It's almost, it's another kettle of fish. But if you're looking at just from like men in general as a society, like, there's so many temptations out there in terms of like practicing monogamy. Sex and advertising sells. Social media, you know, like, you're obviously seeing the quote, the best looking, most attractive girls generally all the time, who are like the influencers. That too, like, can be negative for female emotions. You know, like, I think you mentioned before, we have the highest like mental issues, illness rates, because there's that constant comparison trying to draw against like who's influencing. But
the most popular reason, it's definitely at least more popular than it ever has been for cheating or breaking up, is the prospect of like grass is greener on the other side, like, and it's compounded by the social media being shown, like, you've always been shown like this is possible, like this. Yeah, you
always have. There's always going to be someone else there. You'll have to like Tinder.
So it's definitely harder. We need more respect for staying monogamous, man. I want praise for it.
I agree. I think it's a huge sacrifice, like marrying someone or committing to want to spend like the rest of your lives. It's hard. Well, for me, like, if you're looking like 20, 30 years in the future, like, it's quite hard to envision that, but that will come by in like the blink of an eye before we know it. I'm just trying to think what I'd sacrifice.
Yeah, well, anything else would sacrifice? or that we think people should be more willing to sacrifice. I know in terms of delayed gratification, everyone sacrifices like immediate pleasure for long-term gain with like exercise.
Yeah.
And that's super important. Or cold showers we were talking about before. That's a sacrifice because you're not getting the warm, nice shower.
I think for me, like my sacrifice would be like the desire in time as I've gotten older to be a father, for example, like knowing that what I do now is really going to affect the next 5 to 10 years having children. Like, sure, a lot of people would say your 20s is the time to take risks and make mistakes and spend your money, go overseas, travel, but equally, as you were nearing to the later stages, like if you're thinking about having kids, for example, you're not going to be able to have that same lifestyle that you'd want, like spend, enjoy, consume as much as possible because you're kind of trying to set a foundation for the next decade.
Yeah.
For having children.
Yeah, you mentioned children. I think that's commonly referred to as the biggest sacrifice you ever make. Having a kid, you're basically sacrificing like 20 years, if not the rest of your life, dedicated to them. And I think it probably is on a societal level, not enough parents sacrifice enough for their kids, and oftentimes
it's a shame, but I agree.
Yeah.
I think so. I was trying to think I forgot what I was going to say. I think just in terms of I guess like sacrificing for children. Not everyone wants to have children, like fair enough. But if you want them, that's for me. Like if you're wanting your child to have a better life than what you've had, like you just have to make sacrifice. I think wisdom with age, like that's where wisdom takes a part. It's hard to say if you're like 18 or early, like young, you don't really have that same. There'll be some people I know got married early, having kids. Like one went to school with already got 4 children, but people are running their own race.
Yeah, it reminds me of analysis paralysis. Like when you have wisdom and age, it feels like you're like on the top of a tall hill and you have like perspective all the way down, and like an 18-year-old's only at the halfway up the hill, and you're like, well, not even at the top because we've got a long way to go. But you can see way more, and you have such more of a vast opinion. And that's what wisdom feels like. And I forgot where I was going with that too.
It's just maybe it's the heat's really taking it out of us.
I got full on swack mode now.
But yeah, if you've got like, I think your early 20s, generally, like you're gonna be doing the OE. We had that past podcast talking about like the international perspective. So it's like traveling, for example, will open you up to different environments or trying new things. I think that was the main thing we were talking about. Yeah, but oh gee, I forgot what I was just saying.
It must be the heat.
It must be the heat.
Well, I remembered what I was talking about before.
No, you share what you've got.
You're saying everyone's on their own path.
Yeah.
And talking about age and wisdom, and then committing to something or someone, or committing to having a child or whatever. You could, and related to analysis paralysis, you got to commit at some point. You'll always be gaining more and more wisdom, and you get a better idea of how to tackle things as you get older. But at a certain point, you have to jump in and make the sacrifice of like long-term wisdom for just doing something.
I think I remember what I was going to say. Like, often you might see, or I've seen anyway in the news, you'll have those examples, like 25-year-old buys their first house by themselves, like the extreme of the extreme, because those people had put in the sacrifices very, very early, from when they were like in their teens, working, saving, accumulating wealth, sort of thing, to be in that situation. But then you have the other spectrum where it's like, these are the times to make mistakes, to travel, see the world, to make mistakes, fail, then try again, succeed. I don't think like it's finite. Like time obviously is finite, but like you if you've got 30 years of saving and investing, just in a financial sense, I don't think it makes a huge difference if you were like 40, for example. Like, obviously, monetarily, you'll gain more, but you have more time. But the earlier you start, the more like sacrifices you make early, the easier it is as time goes on. But it's not too late, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Like you would some would argue 30s is where you're still young. Some would say 30s you're starting to get old. You know, you want to settle down and start thing. But everyone's everyone's on their own journey. Like you can't compare all the time. Like just because someone you went to school with buying their, let's say, second property for investment or whatever, or they've had 3 children and you're still single, like you're on your own journey.
Yeah, and those like housing examples where it's like some young guy's dropped out of high school early and like full-time work straight away.
Yeah, totally.
And so he's buying his house at like 21. It's like, yeah, he sacrificed maybe his social life and relaxing for 2 years, you know. But then again, he's also missed out on smoking weed and getting drunk every weekend, which is
they'll miss out. Yeah, they'll have like
comes back to your morals,
different
what you value.
experiences.
Yeah.
But then people who choose to study, for example, well, they're sacrificing by going into, generally, not everyone, like going into debt for high education. So,
Scam, by the way.
For the most part, I think so.
I reckon.
But like goes both ways. You're gonna take the L some way.
Yeah,
the other.
What's the opportunity cost? There's always opportunity cost, eh? Yeah. Anything else you want to say in terms of sacrifice to making the world a better place? I think we covered it. Good discussion.
I don't know. Did you have something? I think you talked about monogamy.
No, as I said, I don't think you need to make any grand sacrifice unless it's if you have a dependent child in particular. Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, you need to sort of. But if you do have a calling, or you just stumble into something that turns out to be like a missionary or something along those lines, and you get fulfillment, by all means, like, for sure. Or like there's lots of alternative ways, like, and some less significant than others, but just like if you think about it, you go to work, like you're probably positively impacting someone's life. You're getting rid of asbestos. You're packing someone's parcel. Like it's a small thing, but you're improving someone's life. Someone will be stoked when they get their parcel, or someone will be stoked when their house is safe to live in.
They can breathe.
And like if you're an entertainer, you're enriching someone's life. And then on a grand scale, like if you're inventing electric cars or something, new breakthrough technologies, then you could change humanity.
If you're flipping cheeseburgers, well, there'll be drunk people that
oh man, you're the savior.
3 a.m.
I was going to ask real quick, maybe wanted to ask what, in terms of sacrifice in Christianity, is a big theme, right? Do you have any thoughts, or what do you think about those two words, or the sacrifice in terms of religion in general, or Christianity, if you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, it depends how...
On behalf of all Christians ever.
It depends how broad you want it to go. Like, if you want to try and hone it down, like, look at Jesus as the sacrifice, or general, like, as loving thy neighbor sort of thing. Like, obviously, like, the 10 Commandments are good to live by, but in terms of, like, doctrine, they're not the be-all, end-all.
Right.
So, but generally, love your parents, don't commit adultery. So, like monogamy, for example. In that sense,
ancient wisdom.
Yeah, I won't go too much into it.
That can be a different part of it.
Yeah, it can be a different podcast, but sacrifices, I'm trying to think of a scripture example, but...
putting you on the spot.
Yeah, you have really thrown me and put me on the spot.
It's all right. Save it for another one.
We'll save it for another one.
Yeah.
But just, I guess, to wrap it up on that sense, like, love your neighbor and love your parents, like, treat others how you want to be treated. Like that would be the big
And it's going to entail many, many sacrifices in amongst that. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, maybe we'll just wrap it up there. This heat is getting pretty hot.
It's frying our brains, obviously.
Not quite used to it. Just, it was less than a month ago, we still had some snow. Maybe a month now. Yeah. I don't know, time's flying by very quickly.
Time's flying.
But yeah, we'll end it there.
On this planet.
that's the wrap for episode 11. We will see you next time for episode 12. Thanks, Devon, for that topic. Hopefully we covered what you wanted to for us to talk about. But yeah, if there's anything,
if not, let us know. We can do another one.
Or get him on to beef us.
I'm
sure he disagrees with
not literally
many, if not all of us.
Probably. But that's
probably
all good.
You, David.
That's all good. Hey, look, that's
good.
Diversity of opinion's good. I'm not saying that I'm right. It's just my opinion. Everything I said is my opinion.
I was thinking that. I was like, everyone, like the hardcore environmentalist and the hardcore capitalist, is like everyone's opinion needs to be voiced and it's real important. And it's like a crowd of people picking how many jelly beans in a jar. You kind of get, with all their different opinions, you kind of get a rough, correct answer in the middle.
Wisdom of the crowd.
No, I've totally had a quote that I heard from Dr. Phil. I'm not going to do it justice, but it was something like, he was saying like council is like what we're doing.
Oh, yes.
Is like it's not what I'm trying to say, but like the antidote to difference of opinions.
Instead of cancel culture, it should be council culture.
That's the one. That's exactly the one.
You said it. You sent it through.
That's the one that I was talking about. So maybe we'll just
for sure.
leave it there.
100% agree.
All right.
Something to think of.
Peace out.
Thanks, guys. Bye.